At 12 years old, Ariel was flying by herself for the first time. She had never done anything like this before. No parents, no older cousin holding her hand. Just her, alone, on her way across the country to Birmingham to spend the summer with her grandparents. As she walked through the airport heading to Gate C-12, her heart raced with excitement and nerves. This wasn't just any flight. This was her big adventure. She was wearing a navy blue cardigan over a white dress with yellow sunflowers on it, her hair tied up neatly with a yellow ribbon to match the flowers. She looked like any other 12-year-old trying to make a good impression, standing tall and confident despite her nerves. But when she arrived at the gate, she saw the flight attendant at the counter, Cheryl Whitman, a woman in her mid-40s who looked like she was all business. No smiles, no warmth, just a strict, by-the-book attitude. Ariel approached her, trying her best to be polite. "Hi, I'm Ariel Martin. I'm flying to Birmingham. I think they called me for pre-boarding," she said, a little unsure. Cheryl barely glanced up from her computer. When she did, her eyes scanned Ariel up and down, as if evaluating whether she belonged there. "Young lady," she said in a tone that felt dismissive, "this is the priority boarding line. Are you sure you're in the right place?" Ariel's smile faltered, but she tried to explain. "Yes, ma'am. My dad said I'm flying first class." Cheryl raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "First class?" she repeated slowly, as though the idea was absurd. "Let me see your ticket." Ariel quickly pulled the ticket from her bag, holding it out nervously. Her father had printed it out that morning, circling the seat number, 1A. Cheryl looked at the ticket, then back at Ariel. She didn't even scan it. "I don't think so," she muttered under her breath. Cheryl leaned over the counter and called to the other agent at the next gate, an older man with gray hair. She turned back to Ariel and shook her head. "This isn't real," she said. "Kids don't fly first class by themselves. You must have taken someone else's ticket." Ariel stood there in shock, her heart sinking. "No, ma'am, I swear my dad booked it for me," she tried to explain, but Cheryl wasn't listening. Without warning, Cheryl grabbed the ticket and tore it in half. Ariel gasped. "Wait, why did you do that?" she stammered, holding the halves of her ticket in her trembling hands. Cheryl crossed her arms, her face cold and unfeeling. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this ticket isn't valid now. Step aside before you make things worse for yourself." The words hit Ariel like a punch to the gut. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and tears quickly filled her eyes. She didn't know what to do, where to turn. The line behind her had gone silent. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. Someone muttered, "She's just a kid." But Cheryl didn't care. She stood there unmoved, staring at Ariel like she was the problem. Shaking, Ariel reached for her phone and dialed her dad's number. When he answered, she could barely speak. "Daddy, yeah, she tore up my ticket," her voice broke. On the other end of the phone, Darius Martin, Ariel's father, didn't hesitate. He didn't run, but he moved quickly. A few gates away, he heard his daughter's voice breaking on the phone, and his heart dropped. He immediately stood up, determined to make things right. When he arrived at the gate, he saw Ariel standing there, holding the torn pieces of her ticket, trembling. She ran to him, relief flooding her face. He knelt down and pulled her into his arms, trying to calm her. Hey, I got you. Breathe," he whispered, holding her close. Ariel sobbed into his chest, unable to explain what had just happened. All she could say was, "She tore it up, Daddy. She just tore it up." Darius stood up slowly, still holding his daughter tightly, and turned to face the gate desk. Cheryl was still behind the counter, avoiding his gaze. His voice was calm but firm. "Excuse me," he said, addressing her directly. "Are you the one who tore up my daughter's boarding pass?" Cheryl hesitated, then answered. "She claims she had a first-class ticket," she said, her tone defensive. "But clearly there was a misunderstanding." Darius raised an eyebrow. "She claimed," he repeated. She's 12. Cheryl went on. First class isn't usually booked for unaccompanied minors. It's against the airline's policy. Darius didn't let her finish. Is it against the policy? He asked, his voice steady. Or is it just unusual to see a black child in first class? Cheryl opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She had no response. Darius pulled out his wallet and showed her his platinum badge. Darius Martin, he said, founder and CEO of Martin Air. And this is my daughter you just humiliated in front of half the terminal. Cheryl's face went pale. She didn't know what to say, but she knew she had made a mistake. I know you didn't recognize me, Darius continued, his voice quiet but firm. That's part of the problem. You didn't see her. You saw a black child, and you assumed she didn't belong in first class. Cheryl's mouth opened again, but no words came out. Darius glanced at the growing crowd, phones already filming the scene. He could see the murmurs starting. He turned slightly, just enough so the passengers could see his face. You made this into something, he said. The moment you judged her without doing your job. Cheryl didn't say anything. For once, she didn't have a script to follow. Darius wasn't done yet, and neither was the lesson he was about to share. Ariel sat quietly now, her legs swinging underneath the high-backed chair at the gate. Her eyes were still swollen, and she clutched a fresh bottle of water that another flight attendant had given her. She didn't drink from it. She just stared at it, almost as though she was trying to disappear behind the label. The older couple across from her whispered to each other, shaking their heads. A woman in her 30s with a tablet had stopped typing and was watching the scene unfold, her mouth slightly open. Darius could feel the shift in the air, thick with discomfort. People sensed that something had gone wrong, and no one could ignore it. He took a deep breath, glancing at his daughter before turning back to Cheryl. I built this airline, he said softly, almost to himself, from nothing. I named it after my father. He used to mop floors at airports, dreaming that one day his son would sit on a plane instead of cleaning around one. He never imagined I'd end up owning a fleet of them. Cheryl looked at the ground, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Martin, I didn't mean... No, you didn't mean to get caught, he interrupted, his voice firm. You didn't mean for the child to have a parent close by. You didn't mean for that parent to be someone who could hold you accountable. You meant to do what you've probably done before. Assume, make the quick judgment, and move on. She opened her mouth again, but Darius raised his hand, silencing her. Please don't speak. This isn't about me scolding you in front of a crowd. This is about you learning something before it costs you more than your pride. Cheryl stiffened, but she didn't argue. The gate manager approached slowly, his face full of confusion. Is everything all right here? He asked, glancing between Cheryl and Darius. She tore up a miner's first-class ticket, Darius said, calm but serious. Didn't scan it, didn't ask any questions, just assumed she was lying. The manager blinked in disbelief. Is that true, Cheryl? Cheryl hesitated, clearly nervous. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding, she muttered. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Darius replied, turning slightly so others could hear. It was a decision made in less than 10 seconds, based on nothing but how my daughter looked. He turned to the manager. You're relieved for the rest of the day. Go check in with HR. Cheryl looked at Darius, flushed, but he wasn't showing pity, just the hard truth. She gathered her things, her shoes clicking loudly on the floor as she walked down the concourse without another word. Darius sat beside Ariel, waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. She just leaned on his arm. You okay, Pumpkin? He asked softly. She nodded barely. She thought I didn't belong, Ariel whispered. Darius exhaled slowly. Yeah, she did. Just because of how I look, because she didn't stop to look past that. Ariel stared ahead, her mind clearly turning. Do you think she would have done that if I was wearing jeans and a hoodie? If I wasn't dressed up? Darius gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Baby, It wouldn't have mattered if you were wearing a tuxedo and a tiara. Some people don't see what they don't want to see. The silence stretched between them before the manager returned with a reprinted boarding pass. "We've got you on the next flight out. Same seat. I'm sorry for what happened today." Darius took the ticket and placed it gently in Ariel's lap. She still didn't move, but after a moment, she looked up at him, a question heavy in her eyes. "Do I still get to sit in first class?" Darius smiled softly, his heart aching for her. "You absolutely do." As the boarding process began, things felt different. They boarded her early this time, no announcements, no extra glances, just a quiet nod from the new gate agent, who handed over a pair of complimentary earbuds with a soft whisper, "Have a good flight, sweetheart." Ariel walked down the jet bridge slowly, holding the new boarding pass like it was fragile. The plane smelled of lemon cleaner and something warm from the first-class oven. When she reached the door, a flight attendant with a bright red pixie cut greeted her. "Hi there, Miss Martin. We've got you right up front, seat 1A. Let me know if you need anything, okay?" Ariel smiled, a tiny but genuine smile, and nodded. As she settled into the oversized leather seat, her feet barely touched the floor. It was spacious, quiet, and fancy, exactly how her dad had described it, but it didn't feel the same. Back at the gate, Darius remained behind, waiting for his next flight in 2 hours, but something about what had just happened wouldn't let him leave. He took a seat off to the side, opened his phone, and began typing a message. Not to the press, not to the internal team, but to every senior leader in the company. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't long. It was a story, the one that had just unfolded in front of too many quiet passengers. At the end of the message, he added one line. "If this is how we treat one black child, imagine how many grown ones we lose before they even take off." Up in seat 1A, Ariel sat frozen. She wasn't scared anymore, but she wasn't relaxed either. Every time someone passed her seat on the way to economy, she felt their eyes. Maybe they were wondering how she ended up there, or maybe they didn't think she belonged. A man in 1B glanced at her, gave a small smile, and asked, "Your first time in first class?" Ariel nodded. "Mine too," he said. "I used miles. Wasn't even planning on it." She smiled at that. "My dad booked it. He flies a lot." "Cool dad," the man replied. "Mine only ever flew coach. He said first class was for people who thought they were better than everyone else." Ariel tilted her head. "What do you think?" He paused. "I think some people forget that kindness should come standard, no matter the seat." She looked at him, her heart lifting a little. "That's what my dad says too." A flight attendant returned with a glass of orange juice and a cookie. "I added an extra one," she whispered, placing it on the tray with a wink. "Peanut butter's the best one." "Thank you," Ariel said softly. "You okay?" the flight attendant asked gently. Ariel hesitated before answering truthfully. "Someone ripped my ticket in half because they didn't think it was real." The flight attendant blinked in surprise. "Wow, that's not okay." I know," Ariel whispered, "but it's not your fault." They shared a quiet look before Ariel turned back to the window. The engines began to hum, the cabin grew still, and soon the plane would lift off. But Ariel didn't know yet that the most important part of her day wasn't the flight. It was the conversation that would wait for her after landing. The flight took just over 4 hours. By the time they landed at Birmingham Shuttlesworth, Ariel had finished one cookie, half the orange juice, and all the silence she could handle. She hadn't spoken to anyone since takeoff, not to the man next to her, not to the flight attendant who kept checking in, and not even to herself. She just looked out the window, feeling the world around her, bigger and smaller at the same time. At the gate, her grandparents were waiting for her. Her grandfather, Charles, wore his usual green golf shirt and an old cap with U.S. Army, stitched in faded gold. Grandma Ruth wore the red lipstick she saved for Sundays. They hugged Ariel like she had been gone for years, not just since breakfast. But they could feel it too. Something had changed in her, a little heavier, a little wiser. Grandma Ruth leaned down. "What happened, baby?" Ariel didn't speak. She just handed her grandmother the two torn pieces of her original boarding pass. Ruth stared at them for a moment, confused before her eyes widened and her jaw set with that fierce, grandmotherly look. But Ariel wasn't crying anymore. She was past that. "I just want to go home," she said quietly. Her grandparents nodded in understanding, and home is where they went. Back in Sacramento, Darius was already in meetings. Not the kind where people nod and pretend to listen, but the kind where heads hang a little lower. The team at Martin Air was shaken, not just because of what had happened, but because of how Darius had chosen to handle it. He didn't yell, didn't fire Cheryl on the spot. He gathered the department heads into one of the company's big glass conference rooms and said, "We need to talk about what we allow." A woman from HR started to speak, but he held up his hand. "No policies, no protocols, not yet. I want you to imagine that was your daughter, your niece, your godchild, standing at that gate, being dismissed and humiliated. Would you still call it a misunderstanding? Would you still call it company policy?" The room was silent. Then he told them everything. What Cheryl had said, how she looked at Ariel, how she hadn't even scanned the ticket, and how she dismissed Ariel without a second glance. Then he showed them something they hadn't expected. Security footage. He'd already requested it before the meeting. They watched in silence as the footage played. The moment Cheryl tore the ticket, Ariel freezing, Cheryl brushing her off. The clip ended and Darius turned to the room. "How many people like her never make it past the gate?" he asked. The question sat there, unanswered. "I didn't build this company to be just another airline," he said quietly. "I built it to be something my father could be proud of, something my daughter could walk into and know she belonged. If we can't guarantee that, then we're just another airline, and I didn't come this far to be just another anything." He dismissed the room, but not before leaving one final instruction. "By next Monday, I want every team to submit a proposal, not about what we fix, but why we allowed it to break in the first place." Back in Birmingham, Aurea was sitting on the porch with her grandfather. The evening was warm, the kind of southern night where the sky turned orange, and the bugs chirped like a rhythm section. Finally, Ariel spoke. "Papa, you ever had someone treat you like you didn't belong somewhere?" He chuckled. "Child, I grew up drinking from a water fountain labeled colored. I know that feeling real well." Ariel looked up at him. "How'd you deal with it?" He leaned back in his chair. "You remember who you are, not what they think you are." Ariel nodded. "You ever hear what your daddy's first job was?" he asked. She shook her head. "Janitor, right there in an airport, the same one he owns part of now." Ariel blinked. "He used to clean floors?" "Yep, then desks, then ran teams. And now he runs the whole thing." She whispered, "Wow." Charles smiled. "Don't let nobody tear your ticket, baby. You know what seat you earned. Sit in it." As Ariel listened to her grandfather, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just flying anymore. She was learning how to stand. A week later, Ariel sat at her father's desk, swinging her feet as she watched him type. He was finishing a company-wide memo. It wasn't long or full of corporate fluff. It was real, honest. He called it the gate test. "If our team can't look a stranger in the eye and give them the same respect they'd give their own child, then they're not ready to be in front of a gate or a person." Ariel smiled. "I like that." Her father looked over at her. "You helped write it. You reminded me why I started this in the first place." She picked up a model airplane from his shelf and turned it in her hands. "You think Cheryl's still mad?" Ariel asked. Darius shrugged. "I think Cheryl has some thinking to do, and that's more valuable than any job title." Ariel nodded slowly, then asked, "Can I still fly first class next time?" Darius grinned. "Only if you're dressed like a sunflower again." Ariel laughed for the first time in days, loud and full, because even though something had been broken that morning, something bigger had been built by the end of it. Accountability, awareness, the kind of power that doesn't show off, but shows up. Sometimes it's not about the ticket or the seat or even the airline. It's about the assumptions we make before the scanner ever beeps. The quiet biases that live in that split second before we decide who someone is. But here's the truth. You are more than someone's guess. You are more than what they see in a snapshot. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong in a room, a seat, or a life you've earned, remember this. Your worth isn't up for debate, not at a gate, not in an office, not anywhere. And if you ever find yourself on the other side of that counter, be better. Choose curiosity over assumption.